On this episode, we discuss acquisitions, esports, AV as a career, and outdated equipment. All that and more on EdTech. EdTech episode 125. Look to the future, forget the past. Hello, AV friends. Welcome to another episode of EdTech. As always, we have our awesome panel of higher ed AV professionals. Today, we have Rob Raspberry. Hi, Rob.
Hey, Aaron. Glad to be here. Glad to be here with everybody. End of the year. I'm so excited.
Absolutely. And also Scott Tyner. Hi, Scott.
Hey, Aaron and Troy and Rob. Nice to be here.
Yes. And today's special guest joining us for this episode is Troy Powers from Northwestern University. Welcome, Troy.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. So tell everyone what you do over there.
So I lead the central IT support team for AV. We oversee about 140 classrooms, a bunch of additional conference spaces centrally, and then through SLA, about a little more than twice that. Oversee a team of 6 and work with a design team in-house.
As if working in higher ed AV isn't hard enough as it is, but Troy has to deal with quarters.
Yeah, it's a nightmare. I was at a state institution in Virginia before, and just normal semesters, and it was great. And I came here and didn't realize it was a quarter system until I got here, actually. And it's a total nightmare. You get about 3 weeks the entire year where there's no classes in session.
Certainly makes the renewal and replacement of anything a huge challenge.
Absolutely.
Well, all right. And this is our last episode of 2024. Can you believe it? It is this year has just flown by and completely just escaped me. Right? Yeah. But all right, let's jump into these articles that we read. So this first one comes to us from AV Technology on avnetwork.com. 2024's AV industry acquisitions. This one was written by Cindy Davis. So there were certainly a few companies that were mentioned in the article that are used quite regularly by a lot of schools in higher ed. What do all these mergers and acquisitions mean to AV and IT technology managers?
A big headache. No, I'm just kidding. There's a number of ways to look at it, and I'm sure we're going to come up with multiple ways. I mean, one, a company acquires another company because they have a technology or a market share that they need and want will expand their business. Or it could be something where they're trying to provide more services to a client. And certainly that offers great opportunities and some pitfalls. So I'll give you an example, and I'm still not sure what to make of it. So I'll give you an example. So we had put out a bid to Vistacom, and then Vistacom was taken over by CTI. And CTI, I guess, mainly has a Midwest and kind of blueprint, and they're expanding out. And, while it's great to see that, there's a company that may have more resources reach out, it sort of came at a weird time. And so it takes time for a company to transition and, be acquired into it. But I think overall, when you look at some of this, if a company has, a good footprint and they're, acquiring a company to either expand a good service or integrate a better technology into their infrastructure, that in general is a good thing. Sometimes there are pitfalls, but, we have to look at each acquisition and see specifically what it does and what it offers to us.
Yeah, I agree. I think Rob hit the nail on the head. There's some that you wonder about, does it really do good for the AV industry as a whole, or is it just doing good for the company or companies involved? But in particular, the one that stuck out here to me was the Williams AV acquiring TeachLogic. I've never used TeachLogic, but it feels as though it's two companies who have a very clear purpose and a very clear goal about supporting the needs of audio in a classroom, particularly students who may have hearing issues and need support. And so I think something like that's great. You can only imagine that those two companies are doing this so that they can produce just a better product and help people more. I'm always amazed to see these enormous integration companies just continue to become more enormous. I say I've actually never really dealt with any of the really large ones because of our location. But let's just say I'm happy with the small shops that we deal with.
I think with mergers like this, I kind of tend to take a wait and see approach because you just don't really know until a year or two in when the companies really become integrated. And I think kind of to echo what Scott said, all these big integrators getting bigger. I think it's maybe not as concerning in terms of competition because there's a handful of really big ones. It's not like it's just one company out there. But I think it really can be a problem depending on where you're located, depending how long has that company been integrated with that integrator, how much of their practices are really being have been put in place already. So you might think you're getting one of these top-notch teams out there to do your job, but really maybe they don't have the same tools, the same training. But because of that name, you think they do, right? So I think there's some concern there. In that interim period where they're transitioning. But, like I said, kind of wait and see approach and see how things turn out in a year or so.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like you have to hope that some of it is to kind of when one maybe larger or slightly different company acquires another one, it is in the betterment of both companies, and that to expand their brand a bit or whatnot, and not to kind of purchase and shut down like the part that maybe we're already familiar with, and kind of changed business practices and makes it not as great. But then it's one of those like really only time will tell. Okay, so let's move on to the next piece, and this one is on AV Buyers Club. It was written by Gary Kay. Hawaii Pacific University enhances esports arena with advanced AV technology. Esports, it's one of those things like, is it going to be like as big as we think it's going to be? What is the push real?
Oh, I would say that look at like market share and revenue. The video game industry makes more revenue than all other media markets combined. If you're not getting behind esports in your university, it's like, what are you doing? Like, I think there's so much money in that industry. We have to be paying attention to it.
Yeah, I agree. I don't. To me, it's not as much of a question of is it going to stick around. It's where people fall into it. We're a unique situation, right? And we don't have any official kind of esports program. We're a very small place. I mean, we have sports that are a small conference up in northern New England that also we value the time that our students are playing sports, but we're by no means a big sports school. With that said, I think that esports, like regular sports, give a tremendous opportunity for students not just to do the thing they love, but to learn about it in math and science and physics and programming, and all of those opportunities come along with it. And it's wise for any school to do it. And for us as AV professionals, it gives us an opportunity to just play with some really crazy new cool technology.
Yeah, I absolutely feel like this esports can be a relatively easy entry for some of the like smaller schools to give something that to really attract students to them, that maybe don't necessarily want to build out a full like varsity sports program, but or already have that, but can supplement it for those kids who aren't necessarily the most athletic, but boy, can they play games. So, and it's neat to see the how schools are kind of embracing esports like they do their traditional football, hockey, lacrosse, kind of basketball like sports, and seeing these kids as, like student athletes just the same, even though their, sport looks a little different than the traditional ones. And it's a more it's great from an accessibility angle, because a lot of kids can't necessarily play sports because of disabilities or any number of issues that they might have. But esports is something that can be a little more open to a different sort of audience in our students. And we talk about a lot of schools having troubles with admissions and getting those kids applying to their schools. This is another way that they could potentially bring them in.
Yeah, so I'm going to take a little alternate path on this because if I'm not mistaken, and Aaron, you can correct me, we had the privilege of having them do a case study at a recent higher ed summit, if I'm not mistaken. I think this is the school.
Yes. Yeah.
And so not only did they offer, get into the esports arena, but because of where they're located, they were able to expand this space almost into a community space. So they could hold different types of high-tech events, different people coming in from the community, bringing the high schoolers in, bringing other people in to expand Hawaii Pacific's, reach and notoriety and everything else. So it became almost a multi-purpose space that was focused with esports as its backbone. Because if you have that kind of speed, power, and technology in a space, you can expand that to other things. So I thought that other aspect of what he brought and what they brought to the table as a result of the esports is something that we also need to take a look at. It's not just about it is about esports. Don't get me wrong, but you can expand that out and bring the community in, use it as recruitment for the high school kids that come in and see what's going on, and a great teaching tool as well.
Yeah. And Scott, I think, touched on it a little bit earlier, that as in as the AV industry, like, this is a great way to introduce students and young generation to different facets of the audiovisual industry, which ties into the another article that we read, which was on AVNation.tv, the Next Level Courts Next Gen with Talent Summit at Pace University. That one was written by Tim Albright. And this type of event is a great way to introduce younger people to AV as a career option. And along with like esports, what are ways to encourage college and high school students even to, look at the AV industry?
Tell them it exists. Does anybody? I mean, I think that's the problem, right? I mean, there's so many, I think, fields that kind of naturally kind of funnel into ours, particularly in terms of like music production and just film production, television production. I don't think we do a good job of marketing the industry. I think we're all a bunch of introverts for the most part, and it just makes it real difficult to get out there. And but we're moving that way. Programs like Next Level, it's doing great things, talking to the kids there, and just the degree programs that we're starting to see at different schools also goes a long way. Because I mean, there just aren't degree programs for our industry anywhere, and I think that's somewhere that maybe us in higher ed have maybe failed in some ways in not maybe promoting that at our own schools, as an option. But God knows how I would even go to begin to do that, right? But like we are kind of maybe uniquely situated to do that, and we see Pace and some of these other schools that have those programs now that they have kind of taken that initiative and gotten it going. And it'd be great to kind of see that ball keep rolling.
I have actually a different take on this than most other people that I've spoken to actually, which is that I think the AV industry is it's somewhat of a niche industry, and it has so many parts from so many other people, right? I mean, 10 minutes ago we were talking about international acquisitions of companies. And so it's got a finance part, it's got a programming part, it's got a sales part, it's got a electrical engineering design part. Um, and so when I hear people often or read about people saying that there's not enough people in the industry, people don't know about the industry. I often wonder what they really mean is the installers, the entry level positions, maybe that we would think of them as entry level, but there's plenty of great installers who've made a career of it. And so for me, that's a place that you need to be getting into. Community colleges or trade schools, particularly with electrical work or people that are learning to be electricians, and showing them what else their options are in that type of field. So I think it's hard, and I don't and I agree with Troy, right? So many of us kind of, I don't know, fell into this industry for one reason or other. And I would say that the two that I see the most is either former people that were in bands, or we have a lot of veterans. So we've been, and I think that fits right with the electrical work that people do in the armed services. There's a lot of that high tech electrical stuff that goes on. So continuing to go to those sources as people leave particularly the military and the armed services.
So, and Scott, I agree with you. Troy, I agree with you. It's almost like what the AV industry, I'm not going to say maybe needs to do or institutions need to do, is you take a look at this as a multi-billion, who knows, maybe $1 trillion industry. And as a career, it can be very lucrative. And it just needs somebody to put together the metrics to say, hey, if we recruit these kids and create a curriculum or certificate or anything for them, there's a good ROI on this. You train a kid to do this kind of stuff and they can make a living or branch off. I think, I'm not sure how we all, like you said, Scott, all of us sort of got into this, but it sort of seems like it was all indirect as opposed to this is my major, say it's an AV technology major, and I was recruited by an integrator or a large company, and I was sort of groomed formally to do that. So that is what's missing, absolutely. And that does take marketing and those kinds of things. But I think the industry makes enough of an impact and generates enough revenue that you would think that there would be more of these programs. And hats off to Pace, for doing this. And if I'm not mistaken, Aaron, if I give a little plug here, weren't they they did a presentation a couple of years ago at the HETMA a conference in as I remember. So I was like, wow, that's really great. So it's definitely, a good article to take a look at. And again, hats off to Pace with what they're doing.
Absolutely. Rich and George are doing amazing things to really reach out to the younger kids. AV, I think it's one of those things, like when you're younger, when you're thinking about what career you're going into, it's kind of like, if you see it, you can be it. Well, with AV, so much of what we do is behind the scenes. And like, you don't see us if everything's going perfectly. And so maybe we have to try and gain just more visibility in the things we do. And I've mentioned in some, when this sort of topic has come up previously, I'd mentioned like trying to meet the kids where they are. So like figuring out how to use TikTok to show like what kind of, what the possibilities are for AV, because there are so many jobs within this funny little industry that we're part of that's not so little. But if we can figure out how to kind of capture that sort of energy and get their attention, they'll be like, oh, that's an option that I might want to pursue. And especially when I feel like this could be a good opportunity, because it seems like a lot of kids now aren't necessarily going, I must go to college after I graduate high school. Like, I feel like we went through a phase where it was kind of one of those, like, majority of people when they graduated from high school, that was their next step. Like, they didn't even question it. Whereas now I feel like it's more of a, maybe college isn't necessarily the way to go. And so we need to like strike there and try to be like, well, here's an industry that you really can train your way through it and don't necessarily need to go to college for.
As great as that is, we do want them to come to our universities. So, but you're right. But I mean, having that kind of talent, even if they get a certificate or whatever, and have them, these qualified professionals work within our institutions will better help us. So, Troy, like you're in central IT, and I know Aaron, you have a pretty robust department, and Scott, a lot of sway over there, as far as things go. And like here at Drexel, we're just starting to understand that the more that we bring in-house and the more talent we bring in-house, the better overall things are going to be. So if we get those kids that have that leg up and, can do a little bit of design, do the installs and do everything in-house for the university, that not only saves us money, it also helps us better serve our students, our faculty, and our staff. So it all flows into one, I guess.
This last one comes to us on flatpanelshd.com. LG discontinues all UHD Blu-rays and Blu-ray players. Woo! That makes you also think, what other technologies do we use, in our classrooms and stuff that can just get phased out?
Oh, sure, we can think of a few. It's whether they'll let us phase it out is the question. So, I mean, VGA, let's get that out of here. Physical media, I think, is in general something that we really don't necessarily need anymore. I mean, you can take something, digitize it, put it on a drive, put it on a server, and use it from there. So do you need a CD, Blu-ray, VHS, beta? No, I'm just kidding. Do we really need those? But at this point, because of some of the faculty and environments we're in, they demand. I still have transparency projectors in a couple of classrooms here, which I am like, they're older than me. How is this possible? But as soon as I say we're going to get rid of them, then I get a call. This instructor who's got tons of experience needs this in a room. And I'm like, how is this possible? But anyway, so I guess, that comes down to an institution policy and going forward from there. But I'm sure you all have other technology that you can think of that you would just be better off just not having to deal with.
I took out a Blu-ray player today because I'm tired of them and want to get rid of them. I'm fine with LG discontinuing Blu-ray players. No problems at all there. I would go really low tech, and I would like to see no more. We have chalkboards at Northwestern, but no more chalkboards or whiteboards anywhere. I think they create equitability issues, right? Because it's a different experience sitting at the front of the classroom versus the back of the classroom. And we have tools that can get around all of that, with annotation, with, document cameras, with a writable surface, too many better ways that create like equitable situations for every student in the class. But that's one of those things where, we, like I said, we have chalkboards. We got rid of them, and they lost their minds. They had to go back. So, I mean, we can't even get rid of the chalkboard. So good luck getting rid of the whiteboards too, right?
I agree with you so much about accessibility, because that to me is such a key to all this. I think we all know higher ed is like an oil tanker, right? Getting it to change direction. But I will say, Rob, we do not have overhead transparency projectors anymore, and I think we're finally getting to that point where the generation of faculty that really use those have retired. And even to the point that the majority of our faculty now weren't taught having people have used them. So they're teaching the way that they were taught, and they knew, and they think that's how you teach. So I mean that means that it's a long time before we get rid of whiteboards for sure, because they're still using those. But yeah, there's a whole list of technology that I think ideally we could replace.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I'm with you on chalkboards. They are just the enemy of technology with the dust and but yeah, can't seem to get rid of those. Do you have processes in place already to determine when you're going to end of life something in a classroom, or is it just kind of a gentle phase out?
Phase out is that's yes. Get rid of it in some places, and when there aren't that many complaints, just slowly get rid of it in the rest of them. As soon as you get complaints, you got to start putting them back in, right? So
we use some data, right? We have some reports on how much things get used, and so if we know it's not getting used, we'll take it out. And for us, the big thing's always been, and I think probably for most people, is whether a lot of this material is available in any other form, particularly streaming. And if it's not, the faculty are being reasonable. They want to show something in a class. We have to provide a means for them to do that. But certainly our copyright officer and the copyright law has changed significantly enough in the last few years that so much of this stuff, they recognize that this stuff is not modern, and so you're permitted to digitize it.
Absolutely. Yeah, we I think it was when we went to get rid of pull DVD players out of general pool classrooms. We kept them in the bigger auditoriums and stuff like that, thinking that maybe there'd be a movie night or something. But the smaller classrooms we did basically based on numbers. But when we pulled the reports and, we're like, here, see, nobody uses the DVD players. And they're like, yeah, but there's like a certain number per room every semester. And I was like, I guarantee you that's from my team pressing the button to make sure that it works. It wasn't purely because it was being used. That was selected just to test. So it was like, oh, okay. Yeah, no, get it out of there then.
It's wild because of the world of streaming. And I still wonder if the day is going to come back where we go away from it because it's so expensive now to stream things. But even our faculty, they don't. The concept of a disc that you have to put somewhere and play, or even cable. We don't have cable in any classroom or space on campus anymore. That shift seems to have really driven things dramatically, and even from the home, from the consumer end, it has definitely come in.
Thank you. This was, as always, great conversation. I love how we start somewhere and then we kind of go on a journey, and we it's always a good conversation. So Troy, how can people reach out to you if they want to continue any of these discussions or just say hey after this?
So you can find me on LinkedIn, Troy Powers, find me on the Hetman community site, or email troy.powers@northwestern.edu.
And how about you, Rob?
You can reach me on LinkedIn, Rob Raspberry, or you can email me at rer37@drexel.edu.
Excellent. And Scott?
You can find me on LinkedIn. I always love to make connections there, and once or twice a month over at Rave Pubs, and then always once a month here.
Excellent. And as for me, you can find me on LinkedIn, on X at Smirin_off_ice, on the HETMA community, and each month here on AVNation's EdTech podcast that can be found on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. You can also find other AVNation podcasts like Women in AV, AV Career Mastermind, State of Control, and many more over on AVNation or anywhere you find podcasts. So hope you all had a great 2024, and I look forward to seeing what we get to discuss next year. See you next time.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
This is AV.
This
is AV Nation.
This is AV Nation.